So we're kind of matching.
We are kind of matching. I like it.
Yeah, but does it make me look fat?
No, it makes you look like a hunk.
A chunk? Did
No.
you say I look like a chunk?
I said you look like a hunk.
I thought I heard chunk. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's embarrassing. We're so sorry. But hey, welcome back to Marriage Matters. This is a continuing weekly video or, kind of podcast on the matters of marriage because we believe marriage matters. So for the last 3 weeks, we were looking at God's purpose in marriage, and we've spent time talking about relationship. One of God's greatest purposes in marriage is for relationship. We're created and designed to be in relationship. And relationship includes having a helpmate, creating and preserving oneness with each other. And today we're going to discuss the role of sacrificial living.
As we have discussed previously, marriage is a representation of Christ's relationship with the church and with us individually. God wants a relationship with us, a true relationship, not just a show up on Sunday kind of visit, but He wants deep, intimate relationship. He is there as our helper. He wants us to be one with Him, and He wants us to be a living sacrifice. In Romans 12, we read, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in the view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will."
That's awesome. But listen to this. This is how the Message translation reads for Romans 12. It says this: "So here's what I want you to do. God helping you, taking your everyday, ordinary life, you're eating, you're sleeping, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does and has for you is the best thing that you can do for Him. Don't be so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, which always drags you down to its level of immaturity, God brings out the best in you and develops well-formed maturity in you." That's how the Message translation reads for Romans. That's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. I love the Message because it's just spot on. So what does this have to do with marriage? Marriage is a proving ground to develop and practice sacrificial living on a daily basis with your spouse. Culture tells us all sorts of lies about marriage and relationship. Culture takes a humanistic view of marriage and it turns it into a what's in it for me relationship. As long as you're making me happy, then we can stay married. But if I'm unhappy, then hit the road, Jack. As long as you're fulfilling my needs, then we can stay betrothed.
Betrothed? Betrothed? Who uses? Oh, you've been watching too much Downton Abbey. That's what's going on here. But you're right. We've mentored many couples that are in crisis because one of the spouses claims that the other one isn't making them happy anymore. Well, they're not meeting my needs. But when we press them to list how they're sacrificing for the other, we many times hear crickets. So the gravitational pull of culture has convinced them that they don't need to be the ones to sacrifice. They deserve to have all of their needs, whims, and desires met by their spouse. If they really loved me, she would have dinner ready for me when I got home every night. Well, if he really loved me, he wouldn't spend as much time hunting and golfing with his buddies, who, by the way, I don't like. If she really loved me, she would be intimate with me at least 5 times a week. If he really loved me, then he would get a different job so we could buy the house of my dreams.
These are just some of the sacrifices that we want the other person to make. Meanwhile, we allow ourselves to be convinced that we're the ones making all the sacrifices. But God is calling us into a life of sacrifice to follow Him. I love how the Message translation says, take your everyday, ordinary life, you're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does and has for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Taking your everyday, ordinary life and placing it before God as an offering. So the question is, how do we do that in marriage?
Oh, I am so glad you asked. So here's what I like. So I love what it says in Paul's letter to the church in Philippi, in Philippians chapter 2. He says this, make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Now to be clear, Paul's writing this letter to the church in Philippi about church body. But just as much as this has meaning and instruction for the church body, it also provides great instruction for marriage. In an earlier video, I talked about how it's my goal to outserve Lori. I want to serve her so well, so often, every day, that she's absolutely dumbfounded and in awe about how much she's served. I do most of the cooking. I try to make the bed every day. I surprise her with flowers. As we talked last week, I do all of the trip planning. Lori shows up. She's the travel princess. I surprise her with gifts, and I help her with her gardening. And I used to do laundry, well, until
that fateful day.
That fateful day.
With my favorite blouse.
With her favorite blouse.
Oh my. That's a story for another day. Anyway, I also try to outserve Kurt, but it's really hard to follow his act.
Yeah, it is.
The point is this. We live in a sacrificial relationship where, because of what God's encouragement is for us to live a sacrificial life, I don't ever have to demand or tell Kurt what I need. He's always on top of it. This is a critical point that many marriages don't understand. You know, the nagging, the demanding that your needs be filled can just leave your spouse feeling frustrated and possibly even angry. So instead, as Paul writes in Philippians, humbly value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. When I look after the interests of Kurt and he does the same for me, our needs are met and our love for each other grows. Our marriage becomes a model of sacrificial living that God is calling us to in Romans 12. When we can live in a marriage based on sacrificial living, we are then ready to extend that relationship to others.
Yeah, I should really say, before I embraced this idea, I would become frustrated at times and angry because, my needs weren't being met. I was so focused on me, my needs, my desires, and what I thought I deserved, that there'd be days and weeks that there was tension in our relationship. As I grew in my faith and understanding, my heart was being transformed into a heart of service towards Lori. During that time, I also heard a message from a Southern Baptist preacher named Wellington Boone. You can find him on the YouTube machine. He gave a message titled, Why Your Wife Ain't Your Mama. And in that message, he talked at length about what it really means for husbands to love your wives as Christ loved the church, as it's written in Ephesians. I was convicted of my wrong attitude towards my marriage and started working towards being a better servant leader in my house and towards Lori. Starting to look after her needs became my top priority, sacrificing my wants and desires to meet her needs. And over time, God did a transforming work in my heart, making my desire to meet her needs. The old desires that I had simply faded away as I became more focused on sacrificial living in my marriage.
Now, we all can become belligerent, and I'm no exception. When Kurt was demanding of me, I became stubborn and resistant. We were in what Emerson Eggerichs calls the crazy cycle. But I noticed the change taking place. It wasn't overnight, but it was noticeable and it was steady. I never felt more loved and cherished. I never felt more comfortable and confident in our relationship. But more importantly, I never felt more inspired to meet Kurt's needs. I hope you see how this works. Remember, God's ways don't make sense to us usually, but in the end, they're better for us. When we live a life of sacrificial living in our marriages, our needs are met more fully without having to be demanding or nagging. Our needs are met because we are willing and eager to meet the needs of our spouse. It's so much easier to be in a marriage based on sacrificial living. Yes, it is counterculture, but that is why God's way is so much better. It doesn't make sense to our human brain or our selfish way of thinking.
So here's the action plan. Here's how to put this into practice. So first, find out what your spouse's needs and wants are. Don't assume that you know them. If you haven't been meeting them, your spouse may not be communicating them to you because, well, you're not going to meet them anyway. So don't assume you know, right? One of the things that we tell couples in premarital counseling and our mentoring is we say, become a student of your spouse. Study them. Be observant. Take notes. Really, get a notepad. Follow them around with a notepad and just kind of take notes on what they're doing and what they might need and how they're acting. I mean, really, take notes. Seriously, this is great. They'll think you're nuts, or they'll call the police, or they'll do both, but who cares, right? You're learning, you're being a student of your spouse. Second, now that you know that, then start meeting their needs. Well, actually, don't just meet their needs, over-deliver. She likes flowers, get her 8 dozen. He likes golf, get him a tea time. She likes morning coffee, make it for her every morning so when she comes out of the bedroom, you're standing there with a coffee cup that says Queen on it. He likes a back rub at the end of a long, hard day at work. Go to YouTube University and learn how to give the best back massage ever. Here's the trick. Blow their socks off. Outserve them. They should be walking around in an absolute daze because you dropped a love bomb on them because of what you did in terms of sacrificial living in your marriage. They should barely be able to speak because they're so blown away. Third, rinse and repeat. Go do it all over again. And this works. Trust us on this one. Outserving each other should be how you do marriage. It'll rock your world. It'll rock your marriage in a good way.
Absolutely. So keep this in mind that initially it may seem like your spouse is just reaping the rewards of your new focus on meeting their needs. You may not see reciprocation right away. That's all right. Keep at it. Remember, the real reason you're doing this is to worship God. Look at the end of Romans 12, verse 1. This is your true and proper worship. So when we're living our lives sacrificially in our marriage and in our everyday life, we are meeting God and we are giving Him true and proper worship. When your needs aren't being met, even though you are sacrificing to meet the needs of your spouse, keep in mind that what you are really doing is worship. But not just worship. Paul calls it true and proper worship. When I keep my eyes upon worship, then meeting Kurt's needs and desires doesn't seem like a sacrifice anymore. Isn't that amazing how godly living in our marriage can become worship when the culture may look at it as just sacrifice and foolishness?
Yeah, and by the way, don't be walking around going, "Hey, you want to worship God? Oh, good. Go make my dinner." That's not it. That's not what we're saying here. So just keep that in mind. All right. So this was kind of a good one today, I think. Yeah. I think it's like one of our top five.
Top five for sure.
We've only done 5, but this is
top 5.
Top 5. You know what? How we live sacrificially in our marriage is a representation of how God wants us to live towards Him in our everyday life. I would suggest that if you believe you're already living sacrificially towards God, but not willing to sacrifice in your marriage, you should really examine your heart. You can't live a sacrificial life towards God and not be sacrificial in your marriage. So start with being a student of your spouse. Learn or relearn what their needs are and wants and the desires of their heart. And then work towards outserving each other. Blow their socks off with your service and your sacrifice. Your marriage is going to grow and thrive, and your overall contentment, happiness, and excitement with your marriage will be amazing.
Absolutely amazing. We've experienced it. As always, there's an accompanying Couples Honest Talk devotion for this video that you can find in the video description below. If there's a topic that you would like us to cover, or if you have questions you'd like us to touch on, please email them to us at hillspringmarriagematters@gmail.com.
And by the way, if you're interested in that couples devotion, you can also find it every week in the newsletter. So it's also a link in there as well as the description.
Okay, perfect.
So, thanks for your time today.
We want marriages to be great at Hillspring because marriage matters.